good morning to all of you. So may I call someone to lead a prayer? So okay Mark, please lead a prayer. So okay, thank you. So can I call the president of the class to check the attendance? So okay Steven, please check the attendance. So Steven says that no one is absent for today. So very good class. Always remember that attendance is a must in school. So thank you. So before we proceed to our discussion, let me ask you what have you learned during our previous lessons? What are your insights or ideas that you have inculcated into your mind during our past lessons? Anybody? Okay, that's correct. Very good. So since you already mastered our previous lessons, we will now proceed to our next discussion. But before that, let's be guided with these objectives. At the end of the lesson, students are able to develop an understanding of a formalist approach, determine the various elements of a short story and literary devices, and lastly, apply the formalist approach in a chosen piece. So that is our objective for today. So before I proceed to our discussion, I will show you class a group of pictures. Then tell me what comes into your mind when you see that particular pictures. So okay, thank you. So in connection with that, our topic for today is all about formalist approach. What is formalism? So formalism is a theoretical position that favors form over the thematic concerns within a text or its relationship with a word outside. The formalists argue that the study of literature should be exclusively about form, technique, and literary devices within a work of literature. Formalism is known for excluding or sidelining factors such as authorial intent and the cultural and socio-political background of the text from its study. Its preference for form, linguistic elements, and literary devices gives this school of literary theory its name. So, what is the history of formalism or formalism literary theory? So, formalism developed into different parts of the world independently and was never a unified movement with a set of defined goals for art and literary criticism. So, basically, formalism first emerged in parts of Eastern Europe, mainly Russia and Poland. In the early 20th century, in Russia, it was centered around Moscow and St. Petersburg. A formalist critic examines the form of the work as a whole, the form of each individual part of the text, the individual scenes and chapters, the characters, the settings, the tone, the point of view, the diction, and all other elements of the text which join to make it a single text. After analyzing each part, the critic then describes how they work together to give meaning or theme to the text. These are the elements of a short story or novel that we need to look for using a formalist approach. First is point of view. Point of view is the viewpoint from which you view the setting. See the action observed, the characters, and hear the conversations. So in looking point of view, we need to use these guided questions for us to look for the point of view of a certain piece. How does the author's choice of point of view affect the reader's understanding and feelings about the story? Next is, does the point of view in the novel have a particular use? Next, what advantages does the author gain by using this viewpoint? Next, what changes in the novel would have to be made if the point of view were changed? Next, does the author's choice of point of view reveal or illuminate his or her theme? Next is the setting. Setting is more than just the place and a time story takes place. Setting also includes the atmosphere, the social and cultural context of the story. A novel may have many settings or occur at different times. However, each time and place were selected by the author for a particular reason. Ask yourself the following questions. Does the setting play an important role in revealing any element of the novel? What information does the setting give about a situation or a character? What influences does the setting have on the characters or their actions? Does the setting contribute to the novel's theme? That is the settings. Next is characters. Who are the characters? Characters are the lifeblood of every novel, and some characters are more important than others. Characters may be round, more like real life with positive and negative traits, or flat, usually stereotypes that symbolize a certain type of person or place or thing. Characters may also be dynamic, meaning changing and growing as the novel's events unfold, or static, those who remain unchanged no matter what happens to them. In addition, note the following important character type as you read through the novel. So ito po yung mga kailangan nating focus. First is the protagonist. Ito po yung main character around whom the novel's action revolves. Usually. Don't be trapped into thinking this character must be human because he or she may not be. Pwede pong hindi po tao yung character. Next is the antagonist. The important character with whom the protagonist is locked in conflict. The antagonist may be a person or some other animate life form or a collection of said life forms. A place or a thing. The foil, a minor character usually who is offered as a contrast to point out or emphasize a distinctive characteristic of the protagonist. Yung antagonist po, siya po yung oppose sa bida. What are symbols? Next is symbols. Symbols extend beyond one-to-one comparison. Be cautious when looking for symbols. A symbol is like a signpost, used and oftentimes repeated at key junctures that alludes to a large meaning than the signpost normally would indicate. Symbols can be public or private. So yung symbol po, pwede po siyang public or private. At ang public symbols have traditional meanings. The rose which is a well-known symbol of love, and the apple is a religious symbol for forbidden knowledge as in the Adam and Eve story, for example po yun. Private symbols can mean anything the author wishes them to mean, and this meaning is only apparent from the way in which they are used in the novel. So sometimes authorial and traditional symbols merge, having both the traditional meaning and one that is more closely related to the novel. So symbols most often reveal characters to us and or strongly allude to the theme of a novel. Readers of a novel might not always agree on a particular symbol's interpretation or even a particular item is a symbol. So be careful to offer plenty of supporting evidence and reasoning to back up both your selection and interpretation of any symbol. So yan po yung ibig sabihin ng symbol. Next is, the most important is the theme. Ito yung tema ng story or the poem, the novel. So what is theme? Theme is the point of the book, the author's message to us, the readers. Theme is often complex and thus it may be difficult for two people out of 10 to interpret the same theme. Though certain readers may see similar themes, most likely the themes they interpret will be different in some way or another to varying degrees. Hence, theme is a matter of individual interpretation. But however, the interpreter must not be too cavalier in assuming he or she can choose any theme whatsoever. The theme must logically come from the text. Therefore, the theme must be supportable by using specific text examples. Care should be given to interpreting these specific text examples in the context that they are used in the novel. Care should also be given to avoid stretching or reaching far to make a text example fit into our interpretation of the theme. So in addition, the wise reader-interpreter will avoid associating the author or the author's life too closely with the main character of or his or her life. So meron po tayong mga sinusunod kapag hinahanap po natin yung theme. Ito yung mga questions na, what lesson the author want me, the reader, to learn from this book? Next is, what lesson does the author want me, the reader, to learn about life? So that is the things that we need to focus or to look for when we're using formalist approach. So basically po, pag sinabi po natin formalist approach, meaning from the word itself, from the title itself, formalist approach, meaning magpo-focus po tayo doon sa text itself. It's not about the background of the author, it's about the text, yung mismong text po ng literary piece. Hahanapin po natin doon yung setting, the point of view, the symbols, the theme, and the characters that are involved in the story. So again po, it's about the form of the text. So ang goal po ng formalist approach is to determine the various elements na involved doon sa piece and how they work together to see the effect to the readers. So ano yung mga advantages ng formalist approach na ito sa literary realism? So first is, mas nagiging malawak yung pag-intindi natin sa novel or sa story or sa poem. It gives us a better understanding because ginagamitan po ito ng mga literary devices, sensory images, which a writer use image to para makakook up tayo sa ating binabasa. Also emphasize the value of the text instead of the context. So it can be done without much research. So sabi po dito, ang formalist ay pwede po siyang magawa without any research processes kasi po, pinafocus po nito is yung structure mismo. Yung structure ng text, the text itself. Hindi na kailangan natin humanap ng other resources, ng mga ideas kasi yung text mismo yung focus, yung piece. Made-develop din po dito yung close reading skills natin. Pag sinabi po natin close reading skills, ano po yon? Ang close reading skills, ibig sabihin po ay hinihimay-himay yung story. Ibig sabihin, word by word. Yung story, isa-isahin po natin yung babasahin until ma-realize natin or ma-identify natin ano yung mga literary devices na nandun. Yung mga figures of speech, part of speech, and the elements of a story. So yun po, close readings, meaning word by word. So kung may advantages, meron din pong disadvantages. So ano naman po itong disadvantage ng formalist approach? So ang disadvantage po nito, knowing na mayroon tayong mga hahanapin ng mga literary devices, parts of speech, figures of speech, sensory images, and the elements, meaning to say, time-consuming siya. Iyon po yung magiging disadvantage niya. Pero, depends naman po doon sa writer kung masyadong mahaba. Pero kung masyadong maikli lang naman po, so it means, konti lang po siya. So again, it depends na rin po. Kung mahaba, edi mahaba rin po yung magiging criticism natin. So guys, may I ask you a question? So what comes into your mind when you hear the word The Great Gatsby? So anyone? So okay, thank you, that's correct. So connection with that to our topic, kindly bring out your copies of The Great Gatsby that I have sent to you in our messenger. So early in July, Tom introduces Nick to his mistress, Myrtle Wilson, who lives with her spiritless husband, George Wilson, in what Nick calls a valley of ashes, an industrial wasteland presided over by the best spectacled eyes of Dr. T.J. X. LeBurge, which stare down from an advertising billboard, meeting her at the garage where George works as her repairman. The three of them go to Tom and Michelle's apartment in Manhattan. They are joined by Michelle's sisters and some other friends who live nearby, and the evening ends in heavy drunkenness and Tom punching Myrtle in the nose when she brings up Daisy. Nick wakes up in a train station the morning afterward. As the summer progresses, Nick grows accustomed to the noises and lights of dazzling parties held at his neighbor's house, where the famous and newly rich turn up on Saturday nights to enjoy Gatsby's well-stocked bar and full jazz orchestra. Nick attends one of these parties when personally invited by Gatsby and runs into Jordan, with whom he spent most of the evening. He is struck by the apparent absence of the host and impression that all of his guests seem to have dark theories about Gatsby's past. However, Nick meets him at last in a rather quiet encounter later in the evening when the man sitting beside him identifies himself as Gatsby. So Gatsby disappears and later asks to speak to Jordan privately. Jordan returns amazed by what he has told her, but she is unable to tell Nick what it is. Nick begins seeking Jordan Baker as the summer continues, and he also becomes better acquainted with Gatsby. One afternoon in late July when they are driving into a Manhattan for lunch, Gatsby tries to dispel the rumors circulating around himself, and he tells Nick that he is the son of very wealthy people who are all dead and that he is an Oxford man and a war hero. Nick is skeptical about this. At lunch, he meets Gatsby's business partner Meyer Wolfsheim, the man who fixed the World Series in 1919 based on a real person and a real event from the Fitzgerald's day. Later at tea, Jordan Baker tells Nick the surprising thing that Gatsby had told her in confidence at his party. Gatsby had known Nick's cousin Daisy almost 5 years earlier in Louisville and they have been in love. But then he went away to fight in the war and she married Tom Buchanan. Gatsby bought his house on West Egg so he could be across the water from her. Gatsby's request, Nick agrees to invite Daisy to his house where Gatsby can meet her. A few days later, he has them both over for tea, and Daisy is astonished to see Gatsby after nearly 5 years. The meeting is at first uncomfortable. Then Nick steps outside for half an hour to give the two of them privacy. When he returns, they seem fully reconciled. Gatsby glowing with happiness and Daisy in tears. Afterward, they go next door to Gatsby's enormous house and Gatsby show off its impressive rooms to Daisy. So, as the day passes, Tom becomes aware of Daisy's association with Gatsby. Disliking it, he shows up at one of Gatsby's parties with his wife. It becomes clear that Daisy does not like the party and is appalled by the impropriety of the new money crown at West Egg. Tom suspects that Gatsby is a bootlegger, and he says so. Voicing his dismay to Nick after the party is over, Gatsby explains that he wants Daisy to tell Tom she never loved him and to marry him as thought the years had never passed. Gatsby's wild party ceases thereafter, and Daisy goes over to Gatsby's house in the afternoons. On a boiling hot day near the end of the summer, Nick arrives for lunch at the Buchanan's house. Gatsby and Jordan have also been invited. In the dining room, Daisy pays Gatsby a compliment that makes clear her love for him, and when Tom notices this, he insists they drive into town. Daisy and Gatsby live in Tom's blue coupe, while Tom drives Jordan and Nick in Gatsby's garish yellow car. On the way, Tom stops for gas at George Wilson Garage in the Valley of Ashes, and Wilson tells Tom that he is planning to move west with Myrtle as soon as he can raise the money. This news shakes Tom considerably as he speeds on toward Manhattan, catching up with Daisy and Gatsby. The whole party ends up in a parlor at the Plaza Hotel, hot and in bad temper. As they are about to drink mint juleps to cool off, Tom confronts Gatsby directly on the subject of his relationship with Daisy. Daisy tries to calm them down, but Gatsby insists that Daisy and he have always been in love and that she had never loved Tom. As the fight escalates and Daisy threatens to leave her husband, Tom reveals what he learned from an investigation into Gatsby's affairs, that he had earned his money by selling illegal alcohol at drugstores in Chicago, with Wolfsheim after prohibition laws went into effect. Gatsby tries to deny it, but Daisy has lost her resolve and his cause seems hopeless. As they leave the plaza, Nick realizes that it is his 30th birthday. Gatsby and Daisy live together in Gatsby's car, with Daisy driving. On the road they hit and kill Myrtle, who, after having a vehement argument with her husband, had run into the street toward Gatsby's passing car, thinking it was Tom. Terrified, Daisy continues driving, but the car is seen by witnesses. Coming behind them, Tom stops this car when he sees a commotion on the road. He is stunned and devastated when he finds the body of his mistress dead on a table in Wilson's garage. Wilson accusingly tells him it was a yellow car that hit her, but Tom insists it was not his and drives on to East Egg in tears. Back at the Buchanan's house in East Egg, Nick finds Gatsby hiding in the garden and learns that it was Daisy who was driving. Though Gatsby insists that he will say it was him if his car is found, he says he will wait outside Daisy's house in case Tom abuses Daisy. The next morning, Nick goes over to Gatsby's house, where he has returned dejected. Nick advises him to go away, afraid that his car will be traced. He refuses, and that night, he tells Nick the truth about his past. He had come from a poor farming family and had met Daisy in Louisville while serving in the army. But he was too poor to marry her at the time. He earned his incredible wealth only after the war by bloodletting, as Tom discovered. Reluctantly, Nick leaves for work, while Gatsby continues to wait for a call from Daisy. The afternoon, George Wilson arrives in East Egg, where Tom tells him that it was Gatsby who killed his wife. Wilson makes his way to Gatsby's house, where he finds Gatsby in his pool. Wilson shoots Gatsby and then himself. Afterward, the Buchanans leave Long Island. They give no forwarding address. Nick arranged Gatsby's funeral, although only 2 people attend, one of whom is Gatsby's father. Nick moves back to the Midwest, disgusted with life in the East. So that is the story po ng The Great Gatsby by Scott Fitzgerald. I hope you understand it well. So if you read carefully, if you understand the story, what is the setting of the story? So the setting of the story is East Egg, West Egg, the Valley of Ashes, and the New York City. So ano naman po yung point of view? So mapapansin nyo po yung point of view po natin dito is first point of view. Kasi po yung narrator, siya po mismo yung nagkwento, si Nick Carraway. He is the narrator who presents a story of what he sees and hears. So who are the characters po? The characters are Gatsby, si Nick, si Buchanan, si Myrtle Wilson, si George Wilson, si Wolfshame, si Jordan Breaker, and si Mr. Guts. So that's the characters po of The Great Gatsby. So ano naman po yung symbol sa story? Yung symbol po sa story ay the green light, which uses the hopes and dream of Gatsby. The Dr. TJ eyes to represent the god. Also po, the Valley of Ashes to show the effect of capitalism. Story po dito, sa tingin nyo, ano po yung theme? Ano yung po yung important lesson na makukuha natin doon sa story? So, yung important lesson po dito or the theme is yung past po, hindi na po siya pwedeng balikan. Kung ano yung nangyari na. Ang magagawa po natin is to move forward and to do better things in life. So, the theme of The Great Gatsby is that past cannot be repeated and everybody has to move forward in life. So, that's the theme po of the story. So, sa story pong ito, mayroon pong mga literary devices na ginamit. So far is, the line is, she's lovely. Si Nick po, kino-compare niya yung elegance of beauty of a movie star to an orchid. So next po is simile. Ito po, babasahin ko po yung linya na ginamitan ng simile. Instead of being the warm water center of the world, the Middle West now seem like the ragged edge of the universe. So mapapansin nyo po, kino-compare po yung ragged edge of the universe. So Nick uses the simile comparing the Midwest to the far edge of the universe to explain how his hometown no longer felt like home after he returned from World War I and why he felt compelled to move east. Sinasabi po dito na yung hometown niya po, parang hindi na po siya home. So kinompare po siya sa ragged edge of the universe. Kaya po, ito po yung naging reason niya para lumipat siya sa Next po is personification. So ito po yung line na nagamit yung personification or ginamit na yung personification. Dressed as friendly and the Buchanan's home as cheerful. So mapapansin niyo po, ginamit po yung personification by comparing those things. So dun po sa kwento, gumamit po ng mga imagery. At sinabi po doon is the depressed nature of the Valley of Ashes while bringing to life and the grand parties at Gatsby. So mapapansin niyo po, ano po yung sensory image na nagamit doon. So okay po, ang nagamit po doon is visual. Kung baga, parang sinasabi po doon is nabi-visualize po natin kung ano yung sinasabi doon, which is the nature of the Valley of Ashes while bringing to the life and grand parties at Gatsby. So parang nabi-visualize natin or nadidepict natin sa imagination natin yung sinasabi doon. Next is the hyperbole. So exaggerate how sensitive and self-conscious Gatsby appears to be. So yun po yung hyperbole doon. So basically those are the things that we must know and we must look for in formalist approach. So any clarification po? Kung ano po ba yung mga questions nyo or tanong or gusto nyo maliwanagan pa? So halos na-discuss naman po natin lahat yung mga need po nating malaman using the formalist approach. Ano nga po ulit yon? First is the setting, the point of view, the themes, the symbols, and yes, that's po the characters most importantly. So ginamit po rin dito yung mga literary devices, which is the simile, metaphor, personification, hyperbole, and also ginamit din po dito sa story na to yung mga sensory images, which is mapapansin natin mostly yung visual po or yung yung nabi-visualize po natin as image yung mga story. Then next is okay, yun na po. So lahat na po na-discuss and I hope you learn something in our discussion for today. For the application nyo po, you need to write your reflection paper in a clean bond paper about your learnings on the story of The Great Gatsby by Scott Fitzgerald. So ilalagay nyo po doon yung mga ano yung naging reflection nyo after reading those scenario. Ano yung mga naintindihan ninyo, ano yung mga lessons nyo, ano yung naging reflect nyo sa sarili nyo after reading the story The Great Gatsby by Fitzgerald. For your evaluation, if you really listen to me during our discussion and if you learn something, I have prepared you some questions or let's say some evaluation that refresh your mind about your learning. So we will have a identification and you will write it in a 1/4 sheet of paper right now. So before we end the discussion, this is your assignment class. Kindly take note of this. Your assignment will be, you need to look for an English American literary piece, then criticize it using a formalist approach. Then write it in a long clean bond paper. Make sure po nagawa nyo yung mga tinakal po natin. Make sure na gagamitin nyo po yung formalist approach for a better understanding of the quiz. So that's all po. Thank you. So class, that is our lesson for today. So I hope you learned something. So thank you for cooperation and your time. So that's all guys. Thank you.